Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another presentation of Healing the Divine Masculine, my personal journey. This is David Champeau, your friendly galactic warrior, on another Sunday afternoon. This is a series based on my personal life journey. I've experienced a lot and learned a lot in 67 years. I want to share what I've learned with younger men so they may benefit. We all have a story to tell and we can rewrite our story. We all must find our own path. So I hope you enjoy this journey with me. Today's subject is archetypes, one of my favorites. Navigating the masculine psyche. It's fascinating stuff. These are the topics we're going to cover real quickly. We'll do a definition. We'll touch on Carl Jung's four archetypes and how the topic has grown. Something from the raw material. And then I'll get into the masculine archetypes from a book by the title of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. That book talks about boy psychology versus man psychology. Also, each of the archetypes has shadow archetypes. And then we'll get into the details of the four accessing the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover in their fullness, and what it means to access them, and then a little bit about how they work together. So there's a lot here to cover. Let's get going. The definition usually credited to Carl Jung in his book Four Archetypes. He writes about the concept going back to at least ancient Greek writing. Jung starts with a concept he called the collective unconscious, where he says, quote, I have chosen the term collective because this part of the unconscious is not individual but universal. In contrast to the personal psyche, it has content and modes of behavior that are more or less the same everywhere and in all individuals. It is, in other words, identical in all men and thus constitutes a common psychic substrate of a supranatural nature which is present in every one of us. That's a mouthful. Basically, modes of behavior that are in all of us, basically in our mass consciousness. If we go back to this, in other words, that there is a commonality in this unconscious content that becomes somewhat unique by taking its color from our own individuality. But it actually is very common across all men, is what he is saying here. If I have any share in these discoveries, it consists in my having shown that archetypes are not disseminated only by tradition, language, and migration, but that they can re-arise spontaneously at any time, at any place, and without any outside influence, because they're always there. The far-reaching implications of this statement must not be overlooked, for it means that there are present in every psyche forms which are unconscious but nonetheless active, living dispositions, ideas in the Platonic sense that perform and continually influence our thoughts and feelings and actions. In other words, besides our own individual psyche, there is a force out there in our collective unconscious that is influencing us, and it comes through as these different archetypes. So his original four archetypes in this book that I was reading, and it's a tough read. These academic books always are. The mother, the rebirth, the spirit, and the trickster. And then as I was looking around, I've seen where this list was expanded to 12 archetypes, which is a number that shows up a lot in our reality, like 12 hours in the day. The topic has grown since then, since Jung first published his work. If you search the internet for archetypes, you'll find an infinite list, definitions, and a whole lot more. There's even somebody's got a website called archetypes.com. Wikipedia has a big page on the subject. Many books have been written. I used to have one from Carolyn Meese titled Archetypes. The major arcana of the tarot is a set of archetypes. So there's 22 cards there, and those are all archetypes. And then the 12 signs of the zodiac is a set of archetypes. In the raw material, which is a collection of books. Ra is an entity channeled by Carla Ruckert back in the early 1980s, along with two men, Don Ellis and Jim McCarthy. Jim McCarthy's still alive. He's the only one of the three. But they published a set of books based on these channeling sessions called the Ra material. They covered many topics in these sessions, one of which was the use of the major arcana of the tarot. Ra, the entity, states that, quote, the archetypal mind is a great and fundamental portion of the mind complex, one of its most basic elements, and one of the richest sources of information for the seeker of the one infinite creator. That is how Ra referred to what we would typically call God, the one infinite creator. So the archetypal mind is a great and fundamental portion of our human mind complex. They used to, in these sessions, Rob refers to humans as a mind body spirit complex. It's another one of the phrases that's repeated very often. But this is one of the most basic elements and richest sources of information for the seeker to understand the archetypal mind. Ra claims that his people, which actually went through their evolutionary process on Venus, he says, they're no longer there. They are a non-physical social memory complex. That was the phrase he used all the time. Ra claims that his people gave the tarot, the original tarot, to very ancient Egyptians. And it's very interesting reading. You can go to the lawof1.info, this website here, and you can read all the sessions, or you can buy the books, or you can download the PDFs, and it's quite fascinating. The last group of sessions is where they start talking about the archetypes and the archetypal mind. Unfortunately, tragedy occurred with Don Ellis, and they were never able to finish the discussion. So, getting into the masculine archetypes, in late 2019, so this was December, the same time I was going back down to Costa Rica to do ayahuasca for the third time, I was reading a book titled King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And these are about the mature masculine energies. I do not remember how I found this book. I'm looking at it right now. It's sitting right in front of me. Authors of Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. But this book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, was the first book I read on this topic of masculinity, and it is still at the top of my list. It's a go-to book for me. It has a profound impact on me that lasts to this day. And reviewing it, the following, what we're going to talk about, is what's in this book. And going through this, it took me to another level, which I'm very grateful for. It was very helpful to put this presentation together. So in the book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, they look at masculine energies from two other aspects. They compare what they call boy and man psychology, and then what they call shadow archetypes. So if you think about boy and man psychology, go back to the presentation on Rite of Passage. From boyhood to manhood, this is another view of that, and they go into great depth. It's very, very well written. Boy psychology is the immature masculine. It has four archetypes that are counterparts to the mature masculine archetypes. So instead of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, we have Divine Child, Hero, Precocious Child, and Oedipal Child. Each of the 8 archetypes, the 4 immature and the 4 mature, has 2 shadow archetypes, an active shadow and a passive shadow. This presentation will not go into the boy archetypes or the shadows. We'll talk about the shadows in the next presentation. So starting with the king in his fullness. Live a life where each day is ruled by honor, integrity, order, consistency, stability, discernment, and actions from our inner authority, our inner king. We will feel centered, grounded, and calm. And when order is threatened, the king accesses the warrior, excuse me, representing aggressive might. But this is not the fact that we are going to access this warrior very in a physical sense, unless we absolutely have to. And we'll talk about more when we get to the warrior. But honor, integrity, order, consistency, stability, calmness, centered, groundedness, these are all topics that have come up in the past, and they are all part of this king energy. So, when accessing the king energy correctly, as servants of our own inner king, we will manifest in our lives the qualities of the good and rightful king, the king in his fullness, which is the traits or the qualities that were on the previous page. We will feel our anxiety level drop because we're calm, centered, and grounded. We will feel centered and calm. We will speak from our inner authority. We will have the capacity to bless ourselves and others. We will have the capacity to care for others deeply and genuinely. We will have some kind of spirituality consciously in all aspects of daily life. And we will know the truth around which all of human life is based. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God, read the king, that's what that means, with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might, and the neighbor as thyself. So a lot of these things have been talked about in previous videos. This is another way of looking at this. Being centered and calm, speaking from our inner authority, speaking from our heart, our truth, and not our mind and our ego. And these other ones, having the capacity to bless ourselves and care for others deeply and genuinely. If you think about a king, a benevolent king and his subjects, okay, he doesn't rule with an iron fist, he rules with compassion. And with honor and integrity. So now we go to the warrior in his fullness. The warrior spirit is a total way of life. The warrior is always alert, always awake. He does not sleep through life. He's an active participant in life. He knows how to focus his mind and body. He realistically assesses his capacities and his limitations in any given situation. This is the do, it's pronounced do, as in do, re, mi. This is the do of the samurai, the dharma, or the Tao, the spiritual path through life. The warrior traditions all affirm that in addition to training, physical training and mental training, what enables a warrior to reach clarity of thought is living with the awareness of his own imminent death. So if you go to one of the things I thought about as I was putting this together was different movies these movies that show these different aspects of these archetypes. So if we go, one of my favorite movies is The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, Ken Watanabe, and they are warriors. And there's a scene in there where Tom Cruise has killed Ken Watanabe's brother-in-law, and he's now captured and staying with Ken Watanabe's character's sister, the wife of the man he just killed. And Tom Cruise says, "I killed her husband," and Ken Watanabe turns around and he says, "It was a good death." And that's how the warriors looked at it. That life was all about ending in a good death because it was a death that had meaning. The warrior energy also shows what we can call a transpersonal commitment. His loyalty is to something, a cause, a god, a people, a task, a nation, larger than individuals. Go right back to that same movie. Ken Watanabe's character was trying to preserve some of their ancient way of living because he could see that Japan, this is 1870s Japan, it was being westernized very quickly by the European and American powers of the day. And he's trying to preserve some of the old ways. You're seeing the same thing happen in India today. The country of India and Sadhguru, people like Sadhguru are trying to do the same thing. They are trying to preserve some of these old ways because things are moving too fast and they're losing their traditions and they are taking on this warrior spirit as this cause that is for their people. It's quite fascinating to watch, but you see it everywhere when you know what to look for. So, accessing the warrior, if we are accessing the warrior appropriately, we will be energetic, decisive, courageous, enduring, persevering, and loyal to some greater good beyond our own personal gain. And you can see this with people like Sadhguru. To do this, we must take care of the mind and body. At the same time, we will be warm, compassionate, appreciative, and generative. So, if you want to look at the story of Dan Millman's Peaceful Warrior, which was an excellent book, the peaceful warrior, the compassionate warrior, it's not about doing battle. The battle's within. It's about how we show up in the world. Strength with compassion, strength from the heart. And we will use this strength to care for others and ourselves. And we have to take care of ourselves first, because that's the only way we can have the strength and the capacity to help take care of others. And we will fight the good fight. So the warrior is here to battle the injustice that he sees in the world. And there's a lot of that in our current world, which is one of the purposes of these videos. Now we talk about the magician in his fullness. The magician energy is the archetype of awareness and of insight. It is the archetype that governs what is called in psychology the observing ego. When the observing ego is aligned with the masculine self, capital S, along an ego self axis, it is initiated into the secret wisdom of the self. This is a very interesting statement. But in another sense, it is the leader and the channeler of this self's power. It is then a vital player in the personality as a whole. So if we think about one way, as I was putting this together, thinking about potential energy versus kinetic energy, if the self, the inner self, is carrying around all this potential energy, okay, all this passion for whatever you're passionate about, it is this observing ego through the magician archetype that helps to channel this potential energy. And to take it a step further, it's the warrior that then takes the action, creating the kinetic energy. That's how these work together. What's one way of how these work together? And we're going to go through some more in a bit. That primordial magician in men has manifested itself most fully in what anthropologists refer to as the shaman. So I've got about six or I think about 10 books on shamanism. I'm looking at some of them right now down here. And the shamanistic cultures are worldwide, going back thousands, tens of thousands of years, to Asia and Europe and Africa and all the continents. There's the concept of the shaman. And the shaman in traditional societies was the healer, the one who restored life, who found lost souls, and who discovered the hidden causes of misfortune. I've done numerous soul retrievals, both through drumming, journeying through drumming, and through, of course, the ayahuasca journeys, and you could say through hypnosis too. When I went under hypnosis one time a couple years ago, he is the one who restored wholeness and fullness to being to both individuals and communities. And he is also known as the sage, the healer, the channeler. So the magician takes on many forms. So let's go back to movies. Um, and I was thinking about Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. You have Gandalf the Gray he goes through his initiatory process to become Gandalf the White. So he's think about it as the mature masculine energy. And then you got Saruman over here, who is the shadow archetypal magician, right? Because Saruman doesn't have the influence of the lover, which we'll talk about in a minute. So when you look at these movies, the other one is Star Wars with Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Darth Vader and the Emperor. These are both magicians and warriors, one of which is the mature and one of which is the shadow. It's a very common theme. So accessing the magician, in the book, they give a little exercise. They call it focusing. They use this with their clients. And it's about you feel the strong emotions. So basically, he wants you to sit in an observation chair. So you just call your chair, your couch, the observation chair. And as these strong emotions come up, whether it's fear or anger, despair, shame, if you go to David Hawkins' map of consciousness, these are all the lower emotions on the map, that low vibrating emotions that are below courage. So fear and anger. I've talked about fear and anger before. But we want to sit in this observation chair, and as these emotions come up, we imagine placing them in a stack in the middle of the room. So just make a stack of emotions on the floor in your room. Stack them carefully, because the king needs order. Okay? Sit back and observe them. Their color, their shape, their tones, other nuances. Are they rounded? Do they have points? Sharp points on them? Do they have what kind of shape do they have? Okay. And then say to them, oh, there you are again. That's what you look like. Oh, now I know what that fear looks like. I can see it. Right? And then when the force of the feeling has passed, as you're talking to it, as you're making friends with it, when the force of the feelings has passed, banish them to a vortex outside. So what you do before you do this is you designate a corner of the land, wherever you are, as your shadow vortex. That's what I call it. And I got that from the Ascension Glossary. We designate a place outside as the shadow vortex. We sit here in our observation chair. We stack our emotions up, right? And then we have a discussion with them. And we talk to them. And then we can thank them for being here, but you are no longer needed. And we send them out to the vortex outside. And you go through this exercise. And I know people who do different variations of this. You can wrap them up into a balloon and send them up into the air. You can throw them into the fire like Alberto Vialdo does. There's all these different variations, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, but you're actually actively working with these emotions. And that's the magician energy that's doing that. And you're clearing them out of your body. There are other techniques to access the magician to help us navigate through life, and writing and drawing are two other techniques that we can use to just get things out of our system and have this discussion with them. This adds a dimension of clear sightedness, of deep understanding and reflection about ourselves and others, and a technical skill in our outer work and in our inner handling of psychological forces. Now, yesterday I just did a video at my fire pit. It was called Pressure Needs to Be Released. And this is exactly what we're doing here is that we have this pressure of these emotions. And we need a way, a technical skill to release this. And that's what this is doing. That's what we're talking about here. We will learn to use our knowledge, our containment, and our channeling of energy flows for human benefit and perhaps for the enhancement of the whole planet. As we heal ourselves, we're healing our society and our planet. Now we move on to the lover. Save the best for last. The lover in his fullness. The man under the influence of the lover wants to touch and be touched, but not in the way you think. Exactly. He wants to touch everything physically and emotionally. And he wants to be touched by everything in the same ways, physically and emotionally. And we could even say mentally and spiritually. I know there's a phrase going around now, sapio sensual, something like that. It's about touching me mentally. I don't like a lot of labels, but we can carry this concept in all the way from physical and emotional, mental and spiritual to where we are touched in this way by other human beings. The lover recognizes no boundaries, and this will be very important later. He wants to live out the connectedness he feels with the world inside in the context of his powerful feelings and outside in the context of his relationship with other people. Now, I just had a discussion this morning with one of my viewers, Wes, shout out to Wes, who sent me an email talking about this exact subject as I was typing this up. Talking about, and we talked about balancing the inner and outer worlds. And the shamans, going back to that concept, the shamans will say that what designates a shaman is someone who walks in both worlds, the inner, the outer world, the form and the formless. So the lover wants to live out and be connected with the world inside, his own powerful feelings and emotions, and outside with those powerful feelings and emotions of the other people. Right? Ultimately, he wants to experience the world of sensual experience in its totality. So it's beyond just the five senses. All of life is art to him and evokes subtle, nuanced feelings. So whether you're watching ants crawl around on the ground or beautiful women dancing, all of life is art. Even watching people argue or disagree. That's all of this is a form of art. It's all a dance. Languages, the different sounds and the subtle meanings of words, will be approached through the lover's emotional appreciation. When I read this again, I just laughed because I love languages and I love words. I've studied Spanish, French, German, and Italian. I was fairly fluent in Italian, and I'm actually studying Italian right now. I take 10 or 15 minutes every day to study a little bit because I just love languages, and it's all part of the lover energy because it's a part of life. The lover is not only the archetype of the joy of life. In his capacity to feel at one with others and with the world, he must also feel their pain, which is kind of a definition of empathy. Others may be able to or try to avoid pain, but the man in touch with the lover must endure it. He feels the painfulness of being alive. We do not want to shut down or block the pain. We must feel the pain. We must feel all of life. Because if we shut down, which I've done for most of my adult life, Um, and I remember saying to myself, where I finally allowed myself to feel, and it hurt. I remember having this conversation with myself 15 years ago when I first had my awakening. And I remember saying, I'm allowing myself to feel. And it was the first time in my life that I had done that since I was a little child. But that's what we must do. We must allow ourselves to feel and even shed a tear once in a while, which I still do. Yeah, because I have memories of certain things that, um, evoke those emotions. And that's okay. We endure it. We just let it flow through us. Feel it and let it flow. Keep it moving. When we access the lover, if we are appropriately accessing the lover while keeping our ego in check, we feel related, connected, alive, romantic about our lives, our goals, our work, and our achievements. This goes back to a comment I made in just one of the last videos about there's in the Earth Mother cultures, there's a sense that there's spirituality in all aspects of life. And this comes from the lover energy, where we are romantic about all aspects of our life, whether you're making food or doing laundry or whatever it is. There's just something about it that we appreciate. It is the lover properly accessed that gives us a sense of meaning. What we, the authors of the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, what they have been calling spirituality. Everything has a sense of meaning. Life has a sense of meaning. Life has a purpose. The lover is the idealist and the dreamer. I am a huge dreamer, daydreamer. Oh, all day long. And I'm also the idealist. I took a little quiz one time and studied something called the Rites method, a guy by the name of Rhys Thomas. And his little framework had 4 or 5 possibilities, and each one of them had um, kind of its own shadow. And you would take this little quiz, and you'd come up with a primary and a secondary. My primary one was called the creative idealist. I thought it's just hilarious. So when I read this, that's all coming from the lover energy, this idealism. Why can't we all get along? That kind of thing. He is the one that wants you to have an abundance of good things. The lover wants you to love life and enjoy the abundance of life. But it goes beyond the just materialism. It's much more than that. It's about good friends and good food and loving companionship and the appreciation for waterfalls and everything. It's all part of that abundance. So, working together, when the warrior is connected with the king, the man accessing these powers is consciously stewarding the realm, and his decisive actions, clarity of thinking, discipline, and courage are in fact creative and generative. So the king has his realm, he's overlooking his realm, his kingdom, and he connects with the warrior in order to take decisive action, but that action is creative and generative, and it's also compassionate. The warrior's interface with the magician archetype is what enables the man to achieve such mastery and control over himself and his weapons. It is what allows him to channel and direct his power to accomplish his goals. So, your weapons, you could also say your superpowers, we all have them, but we must master and control them. And it's that magician archetype working with the warrior. The magician helps us to master and control them and then direct them. The king, the warrior, and the magician harmonize pretty well with each other, according to the authors. And they do so because without the lover, they are essentially detached from life. They need the lover to energize them, humanize them, and to give them their ultimate purpose, which is love. The lover is what allows them to connect with life in all of its aspects. The lover energy gives the warrior compassion and a sense of connectedness with all things. The lover makes the man under the influence of the warrior compassionate at the same time that he is doing his duty. When we look at the shadows next week, you'll understand what that means. Because the warrior without the lover, the shadows are either the sadist or the masochist. The lover needs the king. Remember, we said that the lover doesn't have boundaries. Let's go back to that statement. The lover doesn't have boundaries. So here's where it gets important. The lover needs the king to define limits for him, or boundaries, to give him structure, to order his chaos so it can be channeled creatively. Without limits, the lover energy turns negative and destructive. So the shadows, just to give you a hint here, the shadows of the lover, the active shadow is called the addict. The addict that wants to only enjoy life for all of its sensual pleasures and doesn't have limits. The lover needs the warrior in order to be able to act decisively, in order to detach with the clean cut of the sword from the web of immobilizing sensuality. You gotta love the words these guys use. But basically, it's that if the lover doesn't have the king, there are no limits. And if he doesn't have the warrior, he cannot control himself and he becomes the addict because it all becomes about the sensual pleasures. The lover needs the magician to help him back off from the ensnarling effect of his emotions in order to reflect, to disconnect enough to see the big picture of things. So you see how it's very interesting how important the lover is in working with the other three. The lover needs the king, the warrior, and the magician, and they need the lover to just feel life, but the lover needs them to help him manage all this. Because the lover, without the magician, will get all caught up in his emotions and won't know what to do. And actually, the passive shadow is called the impotent one. The impotent one is one that has no feeling at all. And that's what can happen if we don't bring all these together. So that was it. That was a look at King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and the masculine, the archetypes of the masculine psyche. I really thought this was an interesting topic, and I'm glad I finished it. Even if it is at a high level, the information I shared really resonates with many of my personal experiences. And I hope that something resonated with you and that you were able to get some insight into your own life experiences. I highly recommend the book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I know it was a lot in a short time. I wanted to share this important segment of the journey with you. And as I said, the next one will be in a week or two, and it'll be on the shadow archetypes. We'll talk about some of the shadow archetypes of the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. So, meanwhile, enjoy each day to its fullest. Love the day. Go out there and take decisive action in your kingdom. And we will see you next time.